How are conservation of momentum and conservation of energy used in everyday life?
These two laws are most often used when two objects collide. Momentum is conserved if there are no external forces. And it changes very little if the forces during the collision are much greater than the external forces. For example, if two cars collide, the two cars are the system. The forces between them are much larger than the forces on the wheels that come from outside the system, so momentum is conserved.
What are some of the largest reflecting telescopes?
The larger a reflecting telescope, the more light it can gather. The following is a list of some of the largest reflecting telescopes in the world.
Why is helium used inside airships instead of hydrogen? Isn't hydrogen more buoyant?
Although hydrogen is twice as buoyant as helium, and would be more effective in lifting an airship off the ground, hydrogen gas is extremely dangerous. The German airship, or Zeppelin, the Hindenburg, the world's largest airship at the time, was destroyed on May 6, 1937, in Lakehurst, New Jersey, when it exploded into a huge fireball while attempting to land. 36 people died in the explosion. In 1937, the United States was about the only source of helium in the world, mostly from one gas well in Texas. The Nazis wanted to buy helium for their Zeppelins, but the United States refused to sell it to them as it was considered a strategic resource. Helium is formed from the radioactive decay of uranium and thorium in rocks. It is used today to cool devices and make them superconductive. As a result, the amount of helium available is rapidly decreasing.
What is a thermostat?
A device that is part of a system that maintains a constant temperature.
Why does a small clump of steel sink, while a 50,000-ton steel ship can float?
In order to remain afloat, a ship needs to displace an amount of fluid equal to its own weight. Therefore, if a clump of steel is placed in water, it will sink because it is much denser than water and its volume isn't large enough to displace a weight of water equal to its own weight. A 50,000-ton steel ship can easily stay afloat because it can displace 50,000 tons of water. That is because its hull isn't all steel, but contains a large amount of air. Therefore its density, its mass divided by its volume, is less than that of water.
What are Young's modulus?
Applied pressure, called stress, divided by the ratio of the change in length to the original length, called strain.
What is heat?
Energy transfer that results from a difference in temperature is called heat. Heat always flows from the hotter, energy source, to the cooler object, energy receiver. Heat is transferred by conduction, convection, and radiation.
What's the strength of the gravitational field of Earth?
Earth's mass is 5.9736 x 1024 kilograms and the gravitational constant is 6.673 x 10 to 11 nm 2 kg2. At the surface of Earth, 6.4 x 106 m from the center, then g equals 9.8 n/kg. Thus a kilogram of meat, for example, experiences a gravitational force of 9.8 n toward Earth's center. Earth is huge.
How can you reduce the coefficient of friction?
One method is to use surfaces that have less ability to form chemical bonds. Teflon is one such surface. Another is to have a thin film of oil between the surfaces. The oil will prevent bonding of the atoms in one surface with those of the other. Oil or other lubricants can reduce the coefficient of friction to about 0.1 to 0.2.
On the front of many ambulances, why is the word ambulance printed backwards?
The word ambulance is printed backwards, left and right reversed, so that when viewed in a mirror specifically, the rear view mirror of a car, it will appear correctly, that is, forwards, ensuring that the driver can read it and respond as quickly as possible.
What is a hue?
Related to the wavelength of a color.
Why do closed containers sometimes dent or even collapse on cool days?
Just as a balloon can become smaller when placed under water, a sealed container can change its shape and even collapse under certain atmospheric conditions. For example, a container that stores gasoline for a lawnmower is usually sealed when it's not being used. If the container were sealed on a warm day, when there was little atmospheric pressure, subsequently on a cool, high-pressure day, the gasoline container could be crushed. A second reason is that gasoline vapor exists in the tank. And at low temperatures more of the vapor condenses to liquid, reducing the pressure of the gases in the tank.
But who made it and where?
It is uncertain, but likely to have been made in one of the colonies of Corinth on the island of Sicily. Perhaps by a student of Archimedes decades after he was killed. One method of creating a pulley with a variable diameter is to use a V-shaped belt and a pulley with a groove that can be adjusted in width. This kind of transmission is often used with hybrid cars, and is being developed as a means of decreasing fuel use.
What is gravitational field strength?
Ratio of gravitational force to mass of attracted object, G equals 9.8 N/kg.
What is a torsional force?
Force exerted to twist an object.
On what does the terminal velocity depend?
Air drag depends on the density of the air, the size, velocity, and the shape of the object. Therefore the terminal velocity will depend on all of these, plus the mass. You can test to see if the air drag depends on the velocity, or the velocity squared by doing a simple experiment. You'll need only 5 filters for a drip coffee maker. The filters must be cup-shaped. If the drag depends on velocity, then the terminal velocity will be given by kV equals mg, where k is some constant. Thus v will be proportional to m. On the other hand, if the drag depends on the square of the velocity, then the terminal velocity will be given by kv2 equals mg, so v will be proportional to the square root of the mass. The experiment depends on the fact that you can compare two velocities by dropping two objects at the same time, allowing them to fall different distances, and observing whether they hit the ground at the same time. If the drag depends on velocity, then doubling the mass will double the velocity. Stack 2 filters and hold them above your head. Hold a single filter in the other hand half that distance above the ground. Drop them at the same time and see if they hit the ground together, as they should if 2 filters fall twice as far in the same time. What did you observe? You probably found that they didn't hit the ground at the same time. Now add 2 more filters so you have a total of 4. The square root of 4 is 2, so if the drag depends on the square of the velocity, the 4 filters will now fall twice as fast as the single filter. Try it. Do they hit the ground at the same time? Air drag is more complicated than this simple experiment suggests. At slow speeds the drag constant, k, is larger than at higher speeds. Many studies have been done on the air drag of tennis balls, baseballs, and soccer balls. The fuzz, stitches, and panels have a strong effect on air drag. As anyone who has tried to hit a knuckleball will testify.
What is optics?
Area of study within physics that deals with the properties of and applications of light.
What is drag?
Drag is a force that opposes the motion of an object through a fluid. An object is often said to be aerodynamic when its drag forces are kept to a minimum. There are two types of drag on an airplane, parasitic and induced. Parasitic drag is the force when an airplane wing, automobile, or any other object moves through a fluid. The amount of drag depends on the density of the fluid, the square of the speed of the object, the cross-sectional area of the object, and its shape. A large fuselage, like that of a 747, has more drag than a small fighter airplane. A teardrop-shaped object has less drag than a rectangular block. A parachute is designed to have a high drag. Induced drag is a consequence of the lift generated by the wing. It is a function of the angle of attack of the wing. The lower the angle of attack, the smaller the induced drag. It occurs at the outer edge of the wing where the downward motion of the air caused by the wing meets the undisturbed air next to it. Induced drag causes vortices, the spiral motion of air that can be extremely dangerous to planes flying behind or below. Induced drag can be reduced by putting small, tilted surfaces on the wing tips.
What is a watt, W?
Unit of power. 1 watt is 1 joule, J, per second, S.
What is amplitude modulation, AM?
M wave amplitude changes to represent transmitted information.
What is a tidal wave?
A tidal wave, or tsunami, is not caused by windy conditions or tides, but instead by underwater earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The seismic disturbances create huge upward forces on the water, the opposite of dropping rocks into water. A tsunami is a series of several waves with a period of more than 30 minutes between each. Crest. The ocean first recedes from the beach, then water rushes inland at a very high speed. Large tsunamis can be quite destructive upon reaching the shoreline due to their amplitudes. The most deadly recorded tsunami occurred December 26, 2004, in the Indian Ocean. The earthquake that caused it was off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. That quake released an amount of energy equivalent to 550 million times the energy released in the Hiroshima nuclear bomb. One part of the ocean bottom was lifted by 4 to 5 meters, 13 to 16 feet, and moved horizontally 10 meters, 33 feet. The tsunami, traveling at a speed of 500 to 1000 kilometers per hour, had a low amplitude, 60 centimeters, in mid-ocean, but when it crashed into the coasts from Thailand to India and as far as South Africa, it had an amplitude as high as 24 meters, 79 feet. Some 230,000 people were killed and more than 1 million made homeless.
What type of simple machine is a screw?
You can think of a screw as an inclined plane wrapped around an axle. The ancient Greeks used a screw to lift water. Screws and bolts are also used to fasten two pieces of wood, plastic, or metal together. Screws have a large mechanical advantage, and thus the distance the screw thread moves in its circular motion is much larger than the distance the screw moves into the material. Therefore, the force the screw or bolt exerts to hold the material together is large in comparison to the torque used to turn the screw. Screws and bolts are also inefficient machines because of the friction between the screw and material, or between the metal of the bolt and nut.
What are other examples of impulse and change of momentum?
If you catch a baseball or softball, especially without a mitt, you know that you move your hand in the direction the ball is moving. You certainly don't move it toward the moving ball. In stopping the ball, its change in momentum is the same, no matter how you catch it. Thus the impulse your hand gives the ball is also the same. What changes? When you move your hand in the direction of the ball, you increase the time. The force of your hand acts on the ball. That means that the force is less.
What are simple machines?
Simple machines are devices that match human capabilities to do work to tasks that need to be done. They can reduce the force required or reduce the distance or direction an object must be moved. Because we will eventually run out of fossil fuels, we need to explore other, more sustainable forms of energy, such as solar power. Suppose you want to lift a heavy object. If you use a machine, you will use your stored chemical energy to do work on the machine. The machine, in turn, does work on the object, which increases its energy. if the force is constant and in the direction of motion. Then work is the product of force and distance moved, W equals Fd. The mechanical advantage, ma, of a simple machine is the output force divided by the input force, Foutput/Finput equals ma. To make the output force larger than the input force you must choose a machine that has a mechanical advantage larger than 1. The drawing below illustrates the process. Note that you exert a small input force over a large distance. The machine exerts a larger output force over a smaller distance.
How is light detected?
Light carries energy, so a light detector must convert light energy to another form of energy. In most cases, light is converted into electrical energy. In the eye, which will be discussed more thoroughly later in this chapter, light strikes a molecule called an opsin. The absorption of light changes the shape of the molecule, which results in an electrical signal sent on the optic nerve. In detectors used in digital cameras, when light is absorbed in a semiconductor, one or more electrons are released. The charge they carry produces a voltage that is then converted into a digital signal. In photographic film, molecules consisting of silver and chlorine, bromine, or iodine are used. When light strikes these molecules, it transfers its energy to electrons. The molecules are broken apart and a tiny crystal of metallic silver remains.
How can evaporation be a cooling process?
Because evaporation leaves a cooler liquid, the material on which the liquid rests is cooled. Evaporation is an effective way to cool our bodies. Perspiration leaves a coating of water on our skin that evaporates, cooling the skin. Alcohol evaporates more quickly than water and has an even greater cooling effect. For that reason, parents are advised to rub alcohol on the skin of babies who are running dangerously high temperatures. It can reduce the fever and keep the baby out of danger.
What is geometrical optics?
Deals with the path that light takes when it encounters mirrors and lenses and the uses of these devices.
How did a fogged film start a revolution?
In 1896, the French physicist Henri Becquerel, 1852–1908, was exploring the properties of a compound of uranium that glowed in the dark. He placed the compound in a dark drawer on top of a photographic plate that he had wrapped with heavy black paper to make it light tight. The next morning he was surprised to find that the film was already exposed, or fogged. Becquerel presumed that some unknown rays had been emitted by the uranium compound, gone through the paper, and created the same chemical reaction in the plate that light would. In further experiments he found that a thin piece of metal would block the rays. It was soon alpha, beta, and gammas all are hazardous to our health. Alphas are blocked by skin, but if a radioactive material, such as the gas radium, is inhaled, the alpha particles can cause damage to the lungs. Betas can penetrate skin and tissue and, if they strike a cell, can cause mutations to the DNA. Gammas can cause mutations and kill cells. They are used in cancer radiation therapy.
What is the conservation of mass?
Mass is neither created nor destroyed in chemical reactions.
What holds the quarks together in a proton or neutron?
Eight different massless force carriers called gluons exert the force that holds quarks together. Gluons are members of the boson family. Bosons have integral spin while quarks, electrons, and neutrinos have half-integral spins and are called fermions. Bosons can be created or destroyed while fermions can be created only if an antifermion is also created. A single fermion cannot be destroyed unless an antifermion is simultaneously destroyed.
How is atmospheric pressure measured?
A device to measure gas pressure is called a barometer. There are two major types of barometers, the mercury barometer and the aneroid barometer. Galileo's secretary, Evangelista Torricelli, 1606–1647, the unit of pressure. The Tor, was named after him, developed the mercury barometer in 1643. It consists of a thin glass tube about 80 centimeters, 31 inches, long, which is closed at the top, filled with liquid mercury and placed upside down in another mercury-filled dish. Depending upon the atmospheric pressure pushing on the mercury in the dish, the level of mercury in the tube will rise or fall because there is no air above it. By measuring the height of the mercury, which would usually be between 737 and 775 millimeters, 29 to 30.5 inches, high, atmospheric pressure of the atmosphere can be measured. The most common household barometer is the aneroid barometer, in which atmospheric pressure bends the elastic top of an extremely low-pressure drum. By measuring the amount the top bends, a measurement of atmospheric pressure can be determined. The aneroid barometer is often used in airplane altimeters to measure altitude. Since atmospheric pressure decreases as altitude increases, the aneroid barometer is an ideal instrument to use. It is much safer than the mercury barometer. Because mercury vapor is poisonous and the mercury must be exposed to the atmosphere.
What is static?
Not moving. All the forces and torques acting on a body must sum to zero. The net force on the body is zero, so the object does not move or rotate.
What is a crest?
The highest point of a transverse wave.
What is a lever?
Simple machine consisting of a rigid bar that pivots. 3 different classes.
What is a kilogram, kg?
The mass of a platinum iridium cylinder that is permanently kept near Paris.
What is a jelly donut, JD?
Informal energy unit. Energy in a medium-sized jelly-filled donut. 1 JD equals 239 kilocalories.
What is accuracy?
How correct or how close to the accepted result or standard a measurement or calculation has been.
What is reflection?
Light or other wave bounces off a surface or interface between two media.
What is a quad?
Unit of energy used for measuring energy use by nations. 1 quad is 1000 billion BTUs.
What is polarized light?
Light is an electromagnetic wave that consists of an oscillating electric field and an oscillating magnetic field. The two fields are perpendicular to each other. In most cases, the direction of the electric field has no preferred direction because different parts of the source produce light with electric fields in different directions. Such light is unpolarized. Some sources, however, like laser pointers, emit light whose electric field is always in one direction. Such light is called polarized.
What is brass?
An alloy that is typically 80% to 90% copper with zinc.
What is potential difference or voltage?
In a voltaic pile, today more commonly called a battery, chemical energy is converted into increased energy of electric charges. Positive charges at the positive terminal of the battery have a greater energy than those at the negative terminal. The quantity that is important is not the total energy difference of charges at the two terminals of the battery, but the energy difference divided by the charge. This quantity is called the electric potential difference, or more commonly, the voltage.
What is a resistor?
Device used in electrical and electronic circuits to put a definite resistance in a circuit.
What are the effects of the Coriolis force on Earth?
A reference frame, or coordinate system fixed on Earth, is not an inertial frame. The Coriolis force affects the rotation of winds around high and low pressure areas in Earth's atmosphere. Air flows into a low pressure center. The Coriolis force in the northern hemisphere causes all flows to be deflected to the right, creating a counterclockwise flow around the center. In the southern hemisphere, the deflection and rotation are in the opposite direction. On the other hand, air flows away from a high-pressure center, and so the deflection causes a clockwise rotation in the northern hemisphere and the opposite in the southern.
What is a block and tackle?
Simple machine that is a combination of fixed and movable pulleys.
How did Dalton represent atoms?
Dalton used pictographs to represent atoms. Below, in the first line, are some examples. Dalton would represent a chemical reaction. Carbon plus 2 oxygen to yield carbon dioxide, as shown on the second line below.
What is a segmented mirror telescope?
When mirrors exceed 8 meters, 26 feet, in diameter, they are no longer rigid enough to maintain the same shape when they are tilted. The Keck telescope was the first to be built of 36 hexagonal mirrors. The tilt of each mirror is controlled electronically so that they all focus their light rays at a single point. The electronics can position each corner of the mirror to an accuracy 4 nanometers to create the final image. Constructing the telescope of multiple smaller mirrors greatly reduced the cost of the telescope. The large binocular telescope consists of the Keck I and Keck II 10-meter, 33-foot, telescopes. When they are used together they can detect the interference of light from a star and thus determine its size and location much more precisely.
What is a lift?
Upward force on an airplane wing caused by the air moving past it.
What is sonar?
Sonar, an acronym for sound navigation ranging, is a method of using sound waves to determine the distance an object is from a transmitter of sound. The sonar contains a transducer that converts an electrical impulse to sound. When it transmits and a sound wave to an electrical impulse when it receives. Sound waves, usually brief pulses of ultrasound, are emitted from the transducer, reflected off an object, and reflected back to the transducer. Electronic circuits measure the length of time it took for the sound wave's round trip, and use the speed of sound to calculate the distance the object is from the transducer. Sonar is used predominantly as a navigational tool by humans and animals. Dolphins and bats, among other animals, use sonar for navigation, hunting, and communicating. Machines such as depth finders on boats, distance meters used in real estate and construction, and motion detectors for security devices all employ sonar.
What is a sparticle?
A supersymmetric partner particle. The sparticle for a boson is a fermion, the sparticle for a fermion is a boson. Including sleptons, squarks, gluonios, and photonios, sparticles are theoretical particles that are, or have been, proposed as part of an alternative to the standard model of subnuclear particles.
Does a compass sometimes point downward along with pointing north?
For hundreds of years, navigators using compasses noticed that on occasion, the compass pointer would try to point downward in addition to pointing north. This phenomenon, which went unexplained for several hundred years, was observed by compass maker Robert Norman. He found when flying over the poles one end of the compass would point downward. He understood that the problem was that the pointer was attracted to the pole under the plane. By making the compass rotate in the vertical direction, he made the first dip needle.
What is the Rydberg formula?
Wavelength of the emitted radiation from hydrogen atom is given by 1/x equals r, 1/m2, 1/n2. The numbers m and n are the quantum numbers of the two energy levels. For example, the red line would be m equals 2, n equals 3. The Rydberg constant r equals 0.01097 nm1.
How are particles accelerated to very high energies?
The two highest energy particle accelerators are the Tevatron at Fermilab, near Chicago, and the Large Hadron Collider, LHC, at CERN, European Organization for Nuclear Research, near Geneva, Switzerland. Both machines accelerate and store protons moving in circular paths in a metallic tube, called the beam line, from which all but minute amounts of air have been evacuated. Beams of particles circulate through the tube in both the clockwise and counterclockwise direction. The beams intersect at several places around the circle so that the particles can collide head-on. Many superconducting magnets bend the paths of the particles into the circle, while other magnets focus the particles into small beams. Electric fields created in high-power vacuum tubes provide the accelerating forces on the particles. In particle accelerators, energies are measured in electron volts, eV. 1 eV is the energy a particle obtains by being accelerated by a 1-volt potential difference. Modern accelerators give particles energies of hundreds of MeV. Mega electron volts, or GeV, billions of electron volts. The Tevatron creates collisions between protons and antiprotons, each giving an energy of almost 1.000 GeV, resulting in an energy of 2 GeV when the two beams collide. In the LHC, both beams are protons. The design energy is 7 GeV in each beam for a total collision energy of 14 GeV.
What is the Van Allen belt?
Donut-shaped regions of charged particles around Earth, created by charged electrons and protons from solar wind and cosmic rays trapped by Earth's magnetic field.
How is the strength of an electrical force measured?
British philosopher, theologian, and scientist Joseph Priestley, 1733 to 1804, suggested that the force caused by static electricity might depend on distance the same way gravity does. Using Priestley's idea, the French physicist Charles Coulomb, 1736 to 1806, made quantitative measurements of the force of attraction and repulsion between charged objects using an apparatus shown in the accompanying illustration. He found that the force depended on the charge of the two objects and the distance between them. The relationship he found is called Coulomb's law, and the unit of measurement of charge as the coulomb, c.
What is the uncertainty principle?
Limitation to simultaneous knowledge of position and momentum of particle, dx dps equals h/4p. Equivalent equation for energy and time.
What is the code division multiple access, CDMA?
Method of sending cell phone calls in which 3 calls are packed together with 6 more calls at 2 other frequencies.
What is a transformer?
Impedance matching device.
How was nuclear fission discovered?
Italian physicist Enrico Fermi, 1901 to 1954. Was appointed professor at the University of Rome at the age of 24. Among many projects in which he and his group were involved, perhaps none was more important than his. Studies of the reactions produced when slow neutrons struck nuclei. Fermi had discovered in 1934 that slowing neutrons by passing them through paraffin greatly increased this ability to produce nuclear reactions. He did systematic studies of the results of bombarding a series of materials with slow neutrons. The German chemist Otto Hahn, 1879 to 1968, had a distinguished career that included inventing the field of radiochemistry in 1905. Using chemical techniques and measurements of half-lives to study the results of nuclear reactions, he had discovered dozens of isotopes and at least one element. 3 times he was nominated for the Nobel Prize. Since 1907 he had collaborated with the Austrian physicist Lise Meitner, 1878 to 1968. The teamwork between a physicist and a chemist was a great advantage. Hahn and Meitner, together with Hahn's young assistant Fritz Strassmann, 1902 to 1980. Employed Fermi's slow neutron techniques to create nuclear reactions, and thus more isotopes. When, in 1938, they tried bombarding uranium with neutrons, they expected to create new elements beyond uranium in the periodic table. But they kept finding the element barium in the bombarded uranium. Starting in 1933, the Nazi regime forced people of Jewish origin out of all laboratories and universities. Meitner, who had Jewish parents but had converted to Protestantism in 1908, was protected because she was Austrian. But, when Austria was incorporated into Germany, she lost that protection. In July 1938, she took the train from Berlin to the Netherlands. Thanks to the intervention of two Dutch physicists, she was allowed to leave Germany, but with no possessions. She soon moved to Sweden and kept up her collaboration with Hahn by mail. On December 17, 1938, Hahn and Strassmann submitted their findings for publication but admitted that they had no explanation for the appearance of barium. Meitner and her nephew Otto Frisch utilized Niels Bohr's liquid drop model of the nucleus and Einstein's E equals mc2 equation to propose that the nucleus had split into two, releasing both extra neutrons and a large amount of energy. The Meitner-Frisch paper was submitted a few days after Hahn's. Frisch returned to his laboratory in England and confirmed Hahn's result in January 1939. Hahn won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for his work in 1944, but Meitner never did. It was not long after scientists figured out how to create nuclear fusion that the Nazis began conducting research on how to turn this science into a powerful bomb. Albert Einstein and physicist Leo Szilard urged U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt start a program to complete a nuclear warhead before the Germans did.
What is medical physics?
Study of how physical processes can be used to produce images of the inside of humans, as well as the use of radiation and high-energy particles in treating diseases such as cancer.
What are super high frequency, SHF, waves?
Frequency 3 GHz 30 GHz.
What is an induced drag?
A consequence of the lift generated by the wing. Induced drag causes vortices.
What causes red eye in photographs?
Red eye occurs when a flash is used because there is not enough light for a good exposure. Under normal conditions, in order for enough light to enter the eye, the pupil dilates. But when a flash is fired, the pupils are not expecting the bright light and do not have a chance to constrict. As a result, a large amount of light enters the eye and reflects off the blood vessels that supply the retina in the back of the eye. The redness on the pupil is actually the reflection off these blood vessels captured by the camera. Camera lenses are similar to human eyes in that both have lenses that focus images onto a surface. But camera lenses are not flexible like an eye lens.
What is a sustainable energy source?
primarily wind, water, and solar energy, ultimately receive their energy from the sun, and therefore will be available for billions of years.
What is mass, m?
A property of the object, the net force exerted on object divided by its acceleration, scalar.
What is a de Broglie wavelength?
Wavelength associated with moving particle x equals h/mv.
What is a torsional force?
Force exerted to twist an object.
What are electromagnetism and optics?
Studies how electric and magnetic forces interact with matter.
What was done in Los Alamos?
In September 1942, General Groves and Robert Oppenheimer chose Los Alamos, New Mexico, as the site for the top-secret laboratory at which weapons would be developed. 35 miles northwest of Santa Fe. It was almost totally isolated and the site was occupied only by a school. During World War II, hastily erected housing held Nobel Prize-winning scientists. Younger scientists and engineers recruited into the project, wives and children, and soldiers. After determining the critical mass, the minimal amount of enriched uranium needed to create a bomb, they designed and built the uranium-based weapon called Little Boy. The uranium was divided into two halves and placed in a cannon-like container. An explosive charge drove the two masses together, forming a large enough mass of uranium to sustain a rapid chain reaction and explode. This weapon was never tested. It contained 64 kilograms, 141 pounds, of uranium, about 2.5 times the critical mass. Less than 1 kilograms, 2 pounds, of the uranium fissionate. Only 0.6 grams, 0.001 pounds, was converted into energy. But the result was the equivalent of 15,000 tons of TNT. Little Boy was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. On August 6, 1945. Over 100,000 people were killed in the blast, resulting fires and effects of radiation. The second task of Los Alamos was to design and build a weapon using plutonium. Originally they had expected to use the cannon-type method used with the uranium bomb. But when the plutonium was produced by the Hanford reactors, it was found to contain 240 Pu. And another design had to be developed. They arranged a subcritical plutonium mass in the shape of a sphere and used specially designed explosive charges to simultaneously compress the plutonium, increasing its density above the critical point. Scientists were uncertain that the design would work, so they decided to test the device first.
What is specific heat capacity?
Amount of energy needed to increase the temperature of 1 kilogram of a substance by 1 degree Celsius.
How close can an object be before it appears blurry?
There is a limit as to how close an object can be to the eye before the lens can no longer adjust its focus. Up to about 30 years of age. The closest an object can be focused is approximately 10 to 20 centimeters, 4 to 8 inches. As one grows older, the lens tends to stiffen and it becomes more difficult for the person to focus on close objects. In fact, by the time a person reaches the age of 70, their eyes cannot focus on objects within several meters of their eyes. As a result, most aging adults need reading glasses to focus on close objects.
What are the standards for measurement in physics?
The International System of Units, officially known as System International and abbreviated SI, was adopted by the 11th General Conference on Weights and Measures in Paris in 1960. Basic units are based on the meter-kilogram-second, MKS, system, which is commonly known as the metric system. Most of the world uses the metric system for measuring quantities such as weight. Also known as the meter-kilogram-second, MKS, system. The metric system was last refined at the 11th General Conference on Weights and Measures in 1995.
If you stand with your back against a wall, can you bend forward so the trunk of your body is horizontal?
Most likely if you're male you will tend to fall forward. While if you're female you are more likely to be successful. Again, the question is whether or not the center of gravity of your body is above your point of support, in this case your toes, or in front of it.
What is the difference between a motor and a generator?
In each device, a magnet and a coil of wire are employed to change one form of energy into another form. A motor consists of multiple loops of wire placed in a magnetic field. Either the loops or the magnet can rotate. The current through the wires in the field causes a force that results in rotation and thus mechanical energy. Motors in a home are used in fans, hair dryers, and food processors. There are over 100 motors in a modern automobile. The starter motor is the largest and most powerful. A generator does the opposite of a motor, it changes mechanical to electrical energy, but still consists of multiple loops of wire in a magnetic field. Either the loops or the magnet can rotate. In an automobile, a form of a generator, called an alternator, uses some of energy from the engine to charge the battery. Backup generators use the energy from a gasoline engine to produce enough electrical energy to keep some of the lights and appliances running in a house when the electrical power fails. Electric utilities use huge generators to provide power for a city or larger area. The generators get their energy from steam turbines. The heat required to turn water into steam can come from coal, oil, natural gas, or nuclear burners. Wind power uses generators turned by the propeller blades.
How often do solar and lunar eclipses occur?
Solar eclipses, including partial eclipses, occur more frequently than lunar eclipses. Over the entire Earth there are 2 to 5 solar eclipses per year, while the average number of lunar eclipses per year is between 1 and 2. A solar eclipse can only be observed by a narrow path on Earth's surface, while a lunar eclipse can be seen over a much larger area.
What is electrical power?
Given by P equals Ix, power equals current times voltage.
What is a difference tone?
Frequencies produced as a result of two different frequencies mixing with each other.
What is interference, constructive?
Two waves, both either positive or negative, that add, producing a larger wave amplitude.
What is a rarefaction?
Region of lower pressure in a longitudinal wave.
Why does a rubber balloon that has been rubbed in your hair stick to a wall?
The attraction between a charged balloon and a wall is the result of electrostatic forces. When rubber is rubbed on human hair or a wool sweater, electrons transfer easily to the rubber balloon. The balloon is charged by rubbing the hair or sweater. Fuzz may stand up as a result of the excess positive charges repelling each other. When the balloon is brought near the wall, it polarizes the wall, moving the positive sources toward it and repelling the negative charges away. The negatively charged balloon is attracted to the many positive charges in the wall. As long as the electrostatic force and frictional force between the balloon and the wall are stronger than the gravitational force pulling the balloon down, the balloon will remain on the wall.
How does mass affect acceleration?
The best way to find out is to have two toy cars. Then add some mass to one of them. For example, you could tape coins to the car. Then line them up side by side and use a pencil or ruler to apply the same force to both of them. Again, just give them a tap.
What is diamagnetic?
Caused by circling electrons that create their own magnetic field. Material is repelled by magnetic fields.
What are paramagnet materials?
Caused by unpaired electrons in atoms. Material is attracted by magnetic fields.
What is the timber?
Quality of sound. Sound spectrum produced by an instrument, characterized by relative amplitudes or harmonics.
What are the masses of the quarks and leptons?
Because quarks can't be separated, their masses can only be found by using one or more theories to calculate them. The masses of the charged leptons can be measured to high precision. In the Standard Model, neutrinos are all massless. But recent experimental results demand that they have mass. Masses are given in a unit that is energy divided by the speed of light squared based on Einstein's E equals mc2.
What is an alpha decay?
Type of radioactive decay where nucleus emits an alpha particle. Result is nucleus with atomic number reduced by 2 and mass number reduced by 4.
What is a parallel circuit?
A parallel circuit allows the charges to flow through different branches. For example, the wire from the battery would be connected to one terminal of each of 3 bulbs. The other terminals are connected together and to the negative terminal of the battery. The charges now have 3 separate paths through which they can flow. If one bulb burns out or is removed from the socket, that bulb would no longer light. But the current through the other 2 lamps would not change. They would continue to glow.
What is a capacitor?
Device that consists of 2 conducting plates with opposite charge separated by an insulator to store electric charge.
What is a focal length?
Measures the strength of a lens or mirror. Distance from lens or mirror to focal point.
What is a drag?
Force that opposes the motion of an object through a fluid.
What is a wave?
A traveling disturbance that moves energy from one location to another without transferring matter.
What is the charge of electron?
E equals minus 1.602 x 1019 C.
What is air drag?
Friction caused by an object moving through air. Drag depends on velocity, area, shape, and the density of the air.
What is active noise cancellation?
Active noise cancellation, or ANC, creates a waveform that is the opposite of the noise so that the noise is cancelled. An ANC headset consists of a 1 or 2 microphones that detect the noise. Electronic circuits that invert the waveform, and a headphone driver. Low-frequency noise is more successfully cancelled than noise at higher frequencies. So passive noise reduction is used to reduce high-frequency noise. As a result, low-frequency noises found in helicopter, jet engine, and muffler noise can be controlled. Using ANC while the high squealing sounds of jet engine noise are more difficult to cancel out. If anti-noise is produced by the headphones, can a person hear other people? Music, etc. sounds that aren't noise. The objective of active noise cancellation is to cancel out the noise waveform by producing anti-noise to interfere with the original noise pattern. Since the result is less noise, other sounds are easier to hear. ANC technology is now available for consumers in headsets that reduce noise and allows for easier communication in loud environments. As a result of this new technology, factory workers and helicopter pilots can communicate more easily, and their amount of stress due to noise pollution should be reduced. Airline passengers can listen to music through ANC headphones, while noise from the airplane is cancelled or reduced.
In what ways do atoms emit and absorb light?
In the mid-1800s, Robert Kirchhoff published 3 laws that describe how materials emit and absorb light. 1. A hot solid or a hot, dense gas produces a continuous spectrum. 2. A hot, low-density gas produces an emission line spectrum. 3. A continuous spectrum source viewed through a cool, low-density gas produces an absorption line spectrum.